race. The nation's leading civil rights groups say not only are Black and Latino children more racially isolated than they've been in decades, there's evidence the problem is getting worse. Washington, D.C.'s Paul Laurence Dunbar High School is just one example of the government's failure to address the racial divide in schools today. Others blame the continued segregation on unaffordable housing, the rise of charter schools who can pick and choose who to educate, budget cuts, school closings, and discipline policies that push students of color out of high-performing schools. The Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights reports that African American and Latino students are much more likely to have inexperienced, low-paid teachers. And a government study earlier this year found that even at diverse schools, Black students are suspended and expelled at a rate 3 times greater than white students, a trend that begins as early as preschool.
Class member and also part of Dare to Be Real, and I'm going to interview him today. What is the purpose behind Dare to Be Real?
Dare to Be Real is a group that inspires students to be anti-racist leaders and to give students another perspective on how to diffuse racial comments, racial impacts, or just racist things.
What do you think is the cause of racial segregations within just the schools or just like in general as well?
I think the cause of that is just like the need to fit in and probably just approval or just looking to get approved. And the segregation part is just, like I said earlier or before, the approval, just trying to fit in, trying to be hip or with your group of people, and maybe like discriminating other people is what you think is gonna, or what people think is gonna get them noticed.
What are ways that we could possibly like change those, like the views and everything like that? What are ways we can go about that?
Well, as the first question, Dare to Be Real, that is something that students or people should look into. Just trying to identify like what's happening or how one person treats another, and how and just being like aware. There's like unintentional racism and intentional racism, and I think what people need to identify is when you're doing unintentional, and especially when you're doing intentional. I think just knowing the difference between those would help.
Do you believe that we can actually achieve racial equality?
Yes, but I think it's going to take years or a long span of time for it to be solved, because again, like racial thoughts or like just discrimination is something that people are grown or taught. So that's something that like families or people are going to have to lose themselves or just try to change the way of thinking. So it's going to take a while.
Do you feel like stereotypes play a big role when it comes to just racial segregation as well?
Of course. Stereotypes, I think, play a big part in racial comments or just racial things in general, because it's like an over-exaggeration of a person or a generalization.
Thanks, Richard.
Yeah.